Hello, I'm Alec Hogg, and welcome to our Thursday noontime webinar. As you can see on screen with me is our special guest for today, for the whole hour, Allon Raiz, the founder of Raiz Corp. But before we get into our conversation, my colleague, our managing editor here at Biznews, Stuart Lohman, as always, goes through the tech. Stu?
Thanks, Alec, and thanks for coming, Ellen. Just quickly, those new to the webinar, just if you can see Alec and Allon's faces and the little presentation underneath and hear my voice, can you give us a high five, the little high five option on the GoToWebinar platform? There we go. Alec, got some of those coming through. Is the sound clear though? Can you hear me nice and clearly? Excellent, got those coming through, lovely bit. New to our webinars as well, we like to keep them very conversational. There's a little questions bar on the control panel on the right-hand side. If you can put your questions in there, Alec will pass them on through to Allon as he goes through our discussion. But over to you, Alec. Good luck.
Brilliant. And Jonathan Mercer, I see you've already put a question there, or a question muted. I hope we're not muted anymore. You're muted, but we're not. The way it works is that there would be a cacophony. We've got hundreds of people who are already in attendance here. So as a consequence, we don't open the microphones of the attendees, but we do handle questions by them being put into via text into the questions box, as Stu said a moment ago. I would suggest that you pose your questions as soon as you possibly can, so that we can try and get through all of them today. I'm pretty sure there are going to be many, given the circumstance that we're in. But let's just introduce our special guest today. Allon, we've known each other for a long time. I'm a great admirer of the work that you've done. It's not just me, it's many people in very esteemed places, including the World Economic Forum. I see you were a WEF Young Global Leader in 2008. Now, I remember seeing you around Davos, or at the Congress Centrum, as they call it. Do you still go back there? Or are you, well, let's not talk about the year coming, because with COVID, who knows? But have you been going back there recently?
No, Alec, I've only been twice to Davos, 2 phenomenal years. The last time I went, I broke my knee and haven't been back since. I think there's trauma around Davos and me.
I can't blame you. It's a kind of place that I think if you've been once or twice, you've pretty much seen it. But then there is a lot to absorb that you can nowadays pick up online, and I guess that's also a big benefit. But just take us through your story, Allon, before we start answering the questions. And I hope everybody's happy now. I have boosted the sound. Thanks, John Els, for pointing that out. That everything hopefully is coming through loud and clear now. How did you get into this line of work?
So my story goes back to, I'm a Durbanite. I grew up in Durban to parents who are entrepreneurs, and at some point decided that I didn't want to follow the family business, and went to work for a friend of mine in the retail clothing space. I helped turn his business around. I got into the newspaper. I was 23 years old, and on page 4 in the Daily News, a picture of me appeared. I had done a big promotion, and I got a call from a man who turned out to be a billionaire, a dollar billionaire, and he invited me for a meeting and offered to back me in any business I wanted. I didn't think he was being serious, because who does that? And a couple of weeks later, he called me back and said, what am I still doing at the business where I was? And that started a completely new journey. I started a business called the New York Sausage Factory in Pinetown,
now, before you go
outside
there,
of Durban.
Before you talk about the sausage, was that Jonathan Bear?
I'm not mentioning any names. Not mentioning any names.
I just mentioned this because Jonathan Bear is from Durban, and he was the very first shareholder of mine in MoneyWeb. He bought 25% of the company, took us onto the stock market. He's got an eye for people like you, Allon.
Okay. Well, thanks, Alec. But so I started my first business now, which was called the New York Sausage Factory, which is a fast food operation, and it was an absolute failure. And I remember going to his place, he had a penthouse suite, going up in the lift to go and tell him that I had failed. and that I'd pay him back his money, even if it took me the rest of my life. And I went in there into his apartment, and I expressed this, and I got up to leave, and he said, "Sit down." And he said, "Did I back you, or did I back the business?" And I said, "You backed me." So he said, "That's right. Right now, the business has failed. If you walk out that door, you failed. What would you do if you had to do it again? What would you do differently?" And I said to him, "Well, I changed the menu, I changed the venue, I changed the pricing," and I gave him a whole list of things that I would do. So he says, "Okay, go do that again. I'm not going to back you with money this time. I'm going to back you with people." And he surrounded me with a whole bunch of people. He had in my first book called Lose the Business Plan, I talk about an individual called Negative Ned. Negative Ned was the accountant. He gave me Negative Ned as my finance person. He was involved in advertising businesses. I got one of the CEOs was my marketing mentor, and he surrounded me with a whole bunch of people. And I opened up my second shop in the Pavilion Shopping Center, also in Westville, and that business took off. And that so fast forward many years, I went into vehicle security, and then in the vehicle security business, I sold that. Sorry, I'm jumping all around. I sold that business, New York Sausage Factory, and got into vehicle security. And after 7 years, I wasn't enjoying it, and I had a small supplier, which was an ad agency, who said to me that they were battling, and I worked with him during the weekends and in the evenings. And then one day I said, "No, I'm good at this." I turned them around, and I love this. And I resigned again from this vehicle security business and started what was to become Raiz Corp. The first two businesses, one in Durban, I'd moved up to Joburg by that time. There was a second business in Joburg, a company called Addiction, which was also an ad agency. And the two of them took a view on a quarter of my salary each, and I took a view on my other half. And that's how Raiz Corp started. And it's now 20 years later. That was 2000. We now have we had 13,000 businesses through Raiz Corp. We've got different divisions in Africa. We've got equity division where we invest in entrepreneurs. We do enterprise and supply development on the BBB scorecard for large corporates. We've got all sorts of, we do rural work. It's the most incredibly exhilarating business 20 years later.
Wow. Is the dollar billionaire that you spoke about, who you are not going to identify as Jonathan Baird, is he still invested with you?
So when I started Raiz Corp, I wanted to do it by myself. I wanted to do it without this investor. So I started it, and after about 5.5 years, I made my first profit, and then went to him and gave him equity in the business. And it was an incredible story because the business was really, it was small change. When you make a profit first time you make a profit, it isn't really money. And then when we started to make real money, I got a call from him to call me back, to give me back my equity, to say, "Don't worry about it." And I said, "No." I mean, I'm incredibly grateful and loyal for all the support I've been given. And still 30 years later, he remains my mentor today.
Well, you're very fortunate if it is the same person, because certainly the relationship I've had with him, which goes back to the Money Web stages, I can only tell you that there were many instances where you could see the true colors of the man. And I found this man anyway, to be an extraordinarily integrous human being. So if it is the same, but I know you're not. I know he's low profile. He doesn't like to talk about these things, so I respect that. Allon, I'm going to ask the Biznews community, because we've got lots of people who are in the webinar now listening. Before we get to the questions, what exactly is an incubator? I see there from The Economist magazine that you're the only genuine incubator in Africa.
Yeah, that was a wonderful article that came out just to basically talking about incubation. So incubation has been around. Actually, it started in the US in a place called Batavia, just outside of New York, in 1969, when the New York economy was crashing. and the mayor of Batavia had an old derelict warehouse which he cut up into different pieces, and then people had shared services like a shared reception, shared boardrooms, meetings, etc. But incubation has evolved and has become all sorts of things, and there's different things like incubators, accelerators, but we actually call ourselves a prosperator. I don't like the term incubation, and the reason why I don't like the term incubation is because incubation connotes weakness and illness. Most of our partners are multimillionaires. They're certainly not weak or ill, and we call it a prosperator, and we've done so since like 2006, 2007. Because we make people prosperous, or we assist people who were going to be prosperous to be more prosperous quicker. So I don't like the term incubation, but what it means is effectively a support environment for businesses to ensure that they have a lower set of overheads. And what we do in our environment is we take people through a very strict selection process. One in 100 people who apply will get in, 1 in 5 meet our criteria, and 1 in 20 who meet our criteria will get through our selection process. And once they're in, they go through a whole programmatic situation where they get assigned these mentors. We call them guides. And I told you my story just now. So we give them a finance guide, a marketing guide, a sales guide, a personal development guide, and a strategy guide. That's from my story. So what Raiz Corp is today is a pay it forward for what happened to me. And so we give people effectively a second chance, and we support them. And it's been, and the stories are absolutely incredible that come out of this environment.
I'm going to get into the questions now, starting with David Scott. He says, does Black empowerment regulations affect your effectiveness in helping startups?
No, I don't think so. Well, we've got a division that specifically talks to that. Where it is 51% Black owned, and it has not affected us at all. In a weird way, it's actually assisted us, because what Triple B has done is created a market for BDS, as business development services. And so South Africa is regarded globally as one of the leading BDS countries in the world, because what BE has done is created an industry around incubation which other countries have not had. So it's created a whole bunch of specialists who are, whenever I'm on a plane overseas, when I support other governments in terms of their incubation strategies, South Africans have got a really good reputation when it comes to incubation.
Nawal Ramasar poses this question. He says that Peter Drucker states that every organization needs one core competence, innovation. How do you get startups to think innovatively in South Africa, as there tends to be a trend to start Me Too businesses?
Well, I have a slightly different view to that. I think, first of all, businesses need 3 or 4 core competencies, not one. One of them can be innovation, and I think innovation, one of the things I'm just looking to see if it's on there is the guest lecturing at Oxford University. The quid pro quo there is that I go to all the lectures there for the EMBAs, and there's a Professor Ventresca there who basically is his view, and I buy this, is that innovation should be like breathing. It should be what you do anyway, because all innovation really gives you a slight edge for a while until people copy. We all know, for example, the pinch technology that is on cell phones. You can get it patented, but within 5 seconds, everyone else has found a way around that patent and copied it. So innovation should be like breathing. It should be a constant in the environment. It's not. It just gives you the differentiator. What my view and which I have learned from Professor Ventresca is that a domination strategy in terms of the dominating parts of the market or parts of the ecosystem is far more effective for long-term business growth. And so I use innovation only in the way that it's used in order to gain market share. That's it. So it's like breathing.
Peter Lathwaite wanted to know, where do we find copies of the webinars if he misses or has to leave the live webinar? Stu, do you want to just answer that one quickly?
No problem, Alec. I've just put the YouTube channel link on the chat box at the bottom of the control panel there, and that takes, we publish all webinars on the Biznews YouTube channel when we're finished.
Brilliant. Allon, I'm going to ask a few questions of my own, and just to remind you that this is an interactive webinar. We can't open your microphones, but you can type in your questions, and I'll do my best to get through all of them today. When your story, from what you told me, it didn't sound like you went to university. We know Steve Jobs spent 6 months in university. I remember Jeremy Ord, who started Dimension Data, spent a year in university. Bill Gates was at Harvard for a year. Zuckerberg didn't finish his degree. So some of those very big names didn't actually go through the formal education process. What's your view on all of that? Are entrepreneurs people who just got to get going, or should you go to university first, get a degree or something to fall back on, as they call it?
Well, here's my quick story. I did go to university. I started off actually doing a BSc Agriculture at Maritzburg Varsity. I changed to BCom and took my way around that BCom, did honors there. And then I actually am a 2 times PhD dropout. So I've tried to do a PhD. I've been accepted to do a PhD twice, and I just have been incredibly busy. But to maybe answer the question and maybe upset a few people, I find that university is very good and it's fantastic, but often, and particularly with certain types of degrees like an MBA, people come with an MBA, there is an assumption that because I've got an MBA, I know stuff. What I find with people with MBAs is that they know in a weird way too much, and they're very risk averse, and they look at mainly all the things that can go wrong. So every time I have a young MBA come to me, I almost feel like I want to reduce their salary to pay for all the retraining that we have to do, because there's a practical disconnect between the many of the degrees and what really goes on in the world. And maybe an example which I can use for that is, if you ask any entrepreneur listening right now, if you had your last 10,000 Rand left and you owed the receiver of revenue that 10,000 Rand and you owed the landlord that 10,000 Rand, who do you pay first? So the legal answer is you pay the receiver of revenue, but the practical answer is you're going to pay the landlord, because he's going to find you first. So universities are very often restricted to what they can teach, because that's the legal answer, but practically things happen differently in the real world. The other thing that I see in the difference in small business is that and I've got a business degree, is that it's aimed at big business. It doesn't tell you, very often those models don't apply in small business. They don't translate well into a small business environment. So there's often a huge amount of disconnect between what you learn from the theory and what you actually experience as a small business person.
BSc Agric at Maritzburg University. A lot of former Zimbabweans who can relate to that. I'm sure that your class was full of them. And
yeah.
Well, we won't go into the crazy place called William O'Brien, or the zoo, that I did spend a very interesting year at as well. There's lots of questions coming through.
I was there for 3 years.
In William O'Brien. Well, you're a brave man, and it didn't damage your brain. I can hear it's made it even interesting place. But people who've studied at Maritzburg University will know that it is a most unusual place where you do make incredible friends and some quite extraordinary academics who are there as well. Melanie Minnar asks, she says, COVID-19 aside, is there any research available on the most needed services or products specifically for the South African market? Lovely question.
For me, I don't know of any. Let me start off by answering the question directly. I don't know of any. But my view on all this type of research is that research is research, and it's important. But very often you'll see that very successful entrepreneurs succeed despite the research. The research will say the opportunity is on the left, but entrepreneurs will find opportunity on the right. So I think, once again, coming back to the academic discussion earlier, I find too much research is a bad thing, and when people do research, very often there's a bias, an inherent bias, to validate what they're thinking anyway. So they will look for the research that tells them what they want to hear, and not what they don't want to hear. So I use research as a small piece of how I build a business, not a big piece.
Anthony Shute asks, he says, I myself have started an ad agency in Cape Town. I'm curious, what drew you to ad agencies? What about, did ad agencies help you to grow?
Well, I think it's one of those random events in your life. I did do my honors in marketing, so I had let's call it a penchant for marketing and advertising. And the first business in Raiz Corp happened to be an ad agency based in Durban, which, by the way, 20 years later are still my partners today. And then that led to, inverted commas, a competency, because I knew about that. And then when the second person approached me and said, oh, I hear you turn around ad agencies. Well, theoretically, it's true. I had done one. So there were two. And then when you got two, it went to 3 and 4. And the first 7 businesses in Raiz Corp where I had equity in were all marketing and advertising related. So I think it's just random, but I love marketing. I think people, if I've got 2 boys, and I think to understand marketing and advertising is one of the things that I think every entrepreneur should understand.
Moira Valle, and thanks for getting through the questions quickly, Allon, because there are plenty. She asks, can Allon elaborate on dominating strategy, and what are the other 2 competencies?
Well, let me just talk about the competencies. Yeah, for every business, my view when I train entrepreneurs is they should have 2 to 4 competencies, not more than 4 internal core competencies. And when we talk about core competence, I'm talking about something you would never outsource. I'm talking about something you would prepare to invest time, money, and try to be world best at. Those are let's call the core things that you build in your business. So that's your core competency, and think of them as pieces of a recipe that you combine in order to create a USP, a differentiator in the market. So when working with entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs talk about this thing called USP, unique selling proposition, but don't know how to create it. You create it by combining your core competencies. So that creates a differentiator. Once you've created a differentiator, it gives you a gap, it gives you a place to go. And in that, you can either monetize that and put all the money in your pocket, or you can reinvest that to create more market share. And if you look at all we spoke about Apple, you speak about Amazon, you speak about any of the big companies, and especially the ones that have dominated for decades, if not centuries, you will see that underlying all of them is that they dominated one or more parts of the ecosystem. If you look at Rockefeller, who arguably is one of the richest men that's ever lived, he owned the production of oil, the distribution of oil as well. He was the guy who invented the pipeline. So he owned the production and he owned the distribution. He owned 2 big parts of the ecosystem. And all sort of American antitrust law actually came as a result of him, because he just became so dominant. So that's dominance theory. And so it's about gaining market share deliberately.
There's a wonderful book on John D. Rockefeller called Titan. I'm sure you've read it, Allon. And it has got so many business lessons, not least that you can you can grow up in very unusual and very disadvantaged circumstances and still dominate the world as he did. Abraham Nyatsansa asks, he said, thanks for the university question. Thanks, Abraham. Caroline Fuchsloch says, what are the 3 important things in a founder that you concentrate on when deciding to prosperate a company? Do you need a proof of concept? Do you look at the jockey of the horse, etc.?
So for me, it's always, you know, I spoke earlier about our selection process. For me, it's about what I call blue heart, that ability to stand up again and again and again. I recently looked at a business, in fact, this week, that from an investment point of view, and the business is amazing. It's an amazing business, but I could not, when meeting their two partners, I could not work with one of them. In fact, I tossed and turned that night because there's such a friction between how good the business was and then my view of that I couldn't work with this individual. The person just didn't fit culturally to what I'm used to, and I walked away from that business. So I definitely 100% am of the view that you have to look at the jockey. If I look at one of the biggest businesses in Race Corp today, I backed a business, sure, it's about 14 years ago, two guys, and they were box droppers. They were selling computers at the time. They moved from that into networking and then into software. Today they own a business. Well, one unfortunately passed away in a car accident, but the other partner, who's CEO, runs a phenomenally massive business in an IT business with about 7.5 million policies running on their software. About 35 million lives are run through that software. And it was just them. It was they had blue heart. They had the ability to iterate. So what I look for is the ability to listen, the ability to learn, fight, curiosity, flexibility. And in fact, when we test entrepreneurs, we've got 27 different things that we look at in terms of an entrepreneur. One of them, by the way, and I know you'll find this interesting, is father issues. There's two psychologists, Collins and Moore, that showed unequivocally if you've got father issues, you're more likely to be a successful entrepreneur. So anyone with father issues, they just come right to the front of the queue, you know. But so this is not a definitive, but it's just a probability thing. So we look at all sorts of things. But for me, it's about the jockey and can I work with this individual? And it doesn't mean if I can't that they're not going to be successful. It's just like it's about a partnership and about a resonance and about having fun together. You don't want to be in a partnership where you know there's friction and there's egos and all that kind of environment. And then there has to be also a values match between you know, to me, I wear my Race Corp shirt every day. I wear my jeans every day. I'm not a flashy kind of guy. So even though there might be somebody who's flashy and be successful, it wouldn't resonate with me as a partner. So I think everyone has their different thing, but it's also about a partnership.
Allon, I've got to add two little things to that. Warren Buffett says, never do business with someone who churns your stomach. So it sounds to me like you made the right call. And the second thing on that was just the common sense that seems to permeate when you're looking at these various things. You don't really have to get scientific. Often your stomach will tell you whether it's the right fit, whether the person is actually someone that you can get on with. And that's like, we don't have to be friends with everybody. And if we don't have to be friends with everybody, we certainly don't have to go into business with everybody as well. Melanie asked, Melanie Minard's back again. She says, in your opinion, Allon, are women at a disadvantage in startups or SMEs? And if so, what disadvantages are they?
I don't think women are at a disadvantage at all. You know, I've been so. Maybe I need to qualify what I'm saying. So first of all, I'm the second male member ever of the Businesswomen's Association of South Africa. I'm not anymore, but I was the second male member. BWA had offices in Race Corp. I've been invited to speak at the Women's Forum in France. I strongly believe that women are equal, if not better, to men as entrepreneurs. They get to the point quicker. My mom was an entrepreneur, so I grew up that women, in my head, that women are as powerful, if not more powerful than men. They make, you know, you don't spend the first 10 minutes talking about the sports match on Saturday. So, and I also found that I've had a lot of partnerships with women entrepreneurs and who've subsequently got pregnant, and the whole thing about rearing children. I think the upside from that is that women delegate better than men. So I think women are not at a disadvantage. I think women are the same and certainly more precise in terms of building a business.
Derek Christian wants to know what discounts or excludes someone from being supported by you. Well, first of all, they churn your stomach. Okay, we know that, but what else?
No, so we've got different divisions. So it depends on what the question is. So if we're looking at from Raiz, which is the division around BBBE, then it needs to be 51% Black-owned businesses that can apply. If it's our partner elite, which is our private, we call it curated equity. I actually don't know. I technically know the difference between venture capital and private equity and angel funding. I know that, but I don't know where we are because we started with businesses who at zero. We started at businesses who are 10 years old. So I don't know where I fall. We fall into that continuum. So what excludes what excludes anyone would be that they would have to go through a selection process, number one, and we're very specific, coming back to the dominance theory before, as to what we want. So on our Partner Elite website, we go through, there's only a handful of industries that we look for, and if you're outside those industries, it's not that you're not good, it's just that it's not our speciality. So that's all on our website, which is partnerelite.coza, Partner Elite, one word, and it specifies which industries we go for, and then that's it. And then work hard, be honest, try, and then we'll sort out the business. And you don't even have to be profitable. It's not about the profitability of the business. It's about you. Like I had somebody give me a second chance. That's I see as my role as well.
Kevin Barrett wants to know what have been the common qualities that you observed in successful startup individuals?
Number one, hard work. They're all, if I look at all our partners, they all work damn hard. They are hardworking individuals. The second thing is that they are curious individuals. They want to know more. So if I look at the part, it hasn't all been success with me. So if I look at some of the partners where I failed, some of them have not had the curiosity around the industry. So if I always say, if I know more about your industry than you, then there's a problem here. So they're incredibly curious around the industry. They're constantly trying to understand what's cutting edge. They're trying to see where they can go, where the gaps are. The third thing is that they need to be slightly tilted. They cannot be every single one of our partners has got a level of obsession. That's common. They're just obsessive people. They're obsessed, and which I absolutely love, because I am too. So, I could WhatsApp them at 11 o'clock at night and know that no one's sleeping, because I say, what have been the numbers for today, and I'd get a response like that. There's an obsession that comes with them. They also are kind. I think kind people get further in life for longer. So I look for, in startup businesses, a kindness, and then I look for intellect as well. They need to be smart. So I like smart people. It doesn't mean that it's book smart. It needs to be that they can be street smart or book smart, but they have to be smart. They have to be flexible, certainly flexible, because like COVID has shown, if we're not flexible, then we are now hiding to nothing. So flexibility is incredibly important for me, and also the ability to learn and to listen, and also the ability to teach. I like leadership. They're not all great leaders. Some are good leaders, some are great leaders, some are not good leaders, but because there's a humility, they are able to hand over the leadership to somebody else and take a technical function and hand over the leadership to somebody else. I can go on, the list is long, but those are just some of them.
Wonderful insights, thank you. Albert Bienecker, nice story this. He says, I've worked myself through the ranks in the poultry sector for 18 years. I currently manage operations for a large poultry company in the UAE, but would love to return to South Africa as an entrepreneur. How does one make the switch from working in an established, secure job to starting your own business? And I'm sure that Albert is one of many who have a similar question.
You know, there's an interesting thing, Alec, with entrepreneurs and people who work in corporates. They both have fantasies about each other's world. The entrepreneurs fantasize about the fact that they have a guaranteed salary at the end of every month, and the people working in corporate fantasize about the so-called freedom that we are supposed to have, which is a complete myth. It's not true. We are complete slaves to our businesses. If you were to start a business, what I've seen, and I've worked with many people who've gone from corporate into entrepreneurship, I would start to basically develop the business concept whilst I'm still I've got an income. I would plan everything, but this is the big thing. There is always going to be a point where you jump, and it's never going to be comfortable. And what I've seen with by far the majority of people in corporates who fantasize is they don't jump. They do all the planning, they get to that point, and then they work out that they actually have got a huge salary, and to come in to start a small business, you ain't going to earn that salary. You've got to drop your overheads, and sometimes to zero, for a while until the business makes money, and that alone stops them jumping. So before you even go through the fantasy, you have to have the financial, let's say, grit in order to make that jump.
Some compliments coming through here from numerous people. Thank you for sending those through. We'll pass them on to Allon as well. What can you say? This is from John Vessels. Is what can you say to help those who are themselves the product? I'm an author trying to successfully get traction among churches for a Christian education book. In a way, an author and his book is the product. We need to promote ourselves, our ideas, and our content. What can you say to help?
Okay, so here's it feels like all right. So I don't know the exact situation, so I'm going to try and use something else that I know. When I started Raiz Corp, I needed additional sources of income because I wasn't making enough money. So I went to learn. There was a guy called Frank Furness. I don't know if some of you might know him. You might even know him, Alec, who taught people
I went on a course
right?
with your wife, with Frank Furness early on. Yeah.
Ah, okay, that's right. That's great. So I had gone years before, and I had borrowed. It was 2,400 Rand for that course. I remember I'd borrowed 2,400 Rand from two people to go on that course, and it was a big thing because it was a big risk. And on that course, there were 16 people on that course, and I'm not going to mention names, but one of them wanted to become a speaker, and the other was like me. I'm going to two examples. It was like me, who was using speaking as a means to an end in order to earn the money. What I did when because I speak also internationally, is every cent I earned went back into Raiz Corp. It didn't come to me. The other individual who's an international speaker today and very successful, every cent that he made went to him. Okay, but he didn't want to start a business. It wasn't a means to an end. He wanted to be the speaker. And the third person, the person in the middle, was like me, wanted to start a business, but instead of putting the money into his equivalent of Raiz Corp, he put the money into his own pocket, and then became so this is good money, and then became sort of stuck somewhere in between the two. He wasn't a speaker, and his business collapsed, and he wasn't a successful speaker. So I use that as an example because for me, there's different types of entrepreneurs. There's a survivalist, a lifestyle, and a growth entrepreneur. And for me, the biggest mistake that I see with entrepreneurs is that they don't know which one they are. So I'm going to take survivalist out and look at lifestyle and growth entrepreneur. And this is your relationship with growth. In a lifestyle entrepreneur, which can be a one-person operation where you are the product, the solution there, or the strategy there, is specialization. To specialize so you get more and more money for a particular hour or for a product. So people will pay for one photographer, they'll pay $200 for a photo, and another is any what's it? I forget her name now. One of the top photographers in the world, who takes this
or something like that.
Yes, yeah, Leibovitz, I think. She will be paid £20,000 for a photograph. Same photo, probably very similar camera. You and I probably couldn't tell the difference. One person is specialized, the other person is generic. So you can make a lot of money being an individual. And then what you do with that money, to invest it, save it, do whatever you want, that's your prerogative. But for what I tell entrepreneurs or lifestyles is to specialize. Growth entrepreneurs are about building systems and processes and de-risking the business from themselves. So the business isn't themselves. So for me, Raiz Corp can run without me. I have a sales team, I have a marketing team, I've got people who deliver. I've deliberately made myself not important. So one is you have to be important and you are specialist, and the other is you replace yourself with process and systems. If you want to know which one you are, you ask yourself this question. If you're a person who says, if you want to do something properly, do it yourself, lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm worried that my staff are going to steal from me, lifestyle entrepreneur. My clients only want to see me, lifestyle entrepreneur. So that gives you a clue that that's who you are. So long story short, specialize.
Brilliant. All of the money I made from Frank Finesse's speaking engagements also went into Biznews. I think we got quite a lot in common on that one, Allon. Jane Sturton says, you didn't finish saying talking about core competencies.
Okay. I mean, I've got a lot to say on it. So, but
and we've got a lot of questions. In fact, we've got too many questions. But maybe just a quick addition.
So core competencies. Once again, I'm just going to repeat what I said. These are competencies within the business that are core, i.e., you will not outsource them. They will always be in-house. You will spend money on them. You will invest in them. You'll invest your time, and you will try to be world best at them. So if you've got these core competencies, think of it as different parts of the business. So for example, in Raiz Corp, one of our core competencies is selection. I've spent a huge amount of money in how we select entrepreneurs, and I've learned how to do it. I've built systems, processes. We've got 14 psychologists. I've spent a huge amount of money. I combine that with entrepreneurial learning, which I've also spent a huge amount of time, money, etc. So I then combine that with the third one, which is guiding, and the fourth one, excuse me, which is efficacy, how to measure. And I can combine those in different ways in order to create different product or different differentiators. So I believe I have a better product because I select better. That's my belief, and it's borne out by 20 years in this, and the economists saying that we're the most successful, the only real genuine incubator in Africa. I believe that's a function of my core competencies and how I've combined them. But I've got a different view, which is not in the academia. I think there's two other types of competencies. I think there are critical competencies and scale competencies. The three critical competencies I believe every business has, and these are, you should all build this. Number one is sales competency. Number two is marketing competency, and the third one is distribution. If you build those as what I call critical competencies, you have critical competencies sitting at the top, your core competencies sitting at in the middle, and then you have your scale competencies. So as an example, if I wanted to scale my business, I'm going to need certain competencies specifically to scale, not to differentiate, but to scale. So for example, I will need due diligence competency or legal competencies, etc. So I can't think of scaling my business without those scale competencies as well. So I don't see core competency as a single standalone thing. I see it as a part of a bigger set of competencies, critical, core, scale.
Wonderful. Paul Bosma asks, for people who are looking to start new ventures post the COVID pandemic, what products or industries would you recommend?
Once again, I think you can make money out of anything. So I'm not going to recommend anything. It's about if you see opportunity, if you are, and I'm going to use the word passionate about it. I've got certain views about that, but you need to be passionate about that. Have the skill sets around that, and be able to combine the opportunity with your skill set with your passion to start a business. I think that it's a red herring to talk about what's good post COVID or etc. Because I think everything is open post COVID, including getting into hotels and airlines, etc. If you find the angle, and that's the thing. Is that as long as there is a market who's able to pay, and you're able to produce a solution or to that market at a profit, then you can combine it. So I'm very, people always ask me, what's the latest opportunities? To me, by the time I've said it, it's too late anyway. I'm not it's not about what it is, it's how you come to it that's more important. So I know that's an unsatisfactory answer, but I honestly believe that to be true.
No, I think it's highly satisfactory, Allon, because everything's up for grabs now. Things are changing, and if you can provide a service that improves on what was there or is there, then the market will support you. Debbie Nortier says, what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur with regards to studying? Should they go into business studies?
Yeah, so I studied, and I would always recommend studying. I think studying is not a bad or good thing. I think studying is good and a good fallback, and a lot of people, in my opinion, erroneously see studying as a catalyst to being successful. I see it as an addition, not a catalyst. I think it's an additional thing, and I'm glad I studied, and I would highly recommend that my children study. But for me, it's not, if you didn't study, then you're not going to be successful. That's a very important thing to say, because I see far too many entrepreneurs who have got a chip on their shoulder, the fact that they don't have a degree, that means, oh, I don't know stuff. The opposite is true. It's irrelevant as well. It just makes it a little easier. The one thing that I did, which I wish I didn't, is that I went straight into entrepreneurship. As I left, I started straight. I worked for this friend of mine for a few months until I started my own business. I never learned about systems, about process, about how business works from a large corporate. So to be honest, I would recommend, and I'm only speaking as I would tell my kids as they grow up. My kids are still teenagers, but that when you in your 20s, go and learn how business works in a corporate, get some understanding of that, and then start. I didn't do that. It worked for me. It might work for others, but that's what I would recommend to my two boys.
Christina Nell says, I have a business in Zambia and want to start penetrating the Southern African market. I have no idea where to start with marketing it.
I don't know what the business is, so I don't know how I could help. But I would just basically try and understand where the market coalesces. So in every market, markets coalesce around certain areas, where they coalesce around certain media, where they coalesce around certain events, whether they coalesce around certain geographies, they coalesce. So look for where your particular business coalesces, and that's a good place to start understanding where the good place to enter the market is. What you will find always when you enter a new market is all the antibodies will come to try and evict you very quickly and dissuade you. So I would also encourage you to persist beyond the first couple of months, even years, in terms of trying to penetrate a new market.
Edward Neliumbeni asks, how does South Africa fare against other countries in nurturing small businesses, and why do most small businesses fail?
Two huge questions there. So the first question, the quick answer is not good at all. There's a report called the GEM report, which is a global entrepreneurship monitor, which is often referred to, and South Africa fares very badly in terms of developing countries, in terms of what they call the TEA, total entrepreneurial activity rate. countries such as Uganda have 5 to 8 times more entrepreneurial activity. However, when you look at that a little bit more, what's not clear in terms of those reports is what's the level of survivalist entrepreneurs measured in that number. In the developed world, you actually have lower entrepreneurial rates. So if you look at the US or Japan, for example, has got 1% TA rate or thereabout. It's got very low entrepreneurial rates because the economy is established. So that when the economy is still developing, there's higher levels of entrepreneurial rates. So we don't fare well. And to me, that's part of our education system. And just as a quick aside, I've gone into the education system, into the schooling system, and I put entrepreneurship into the curriculum of the school that I'm involved in. Coming back, why entrepreneurs fail? They fail for 96% of businesses will fail within a 10-year period, most of them in the first 2 years. Most often is that the business didn't have CERTI, compelling economic right to exist. Do you have something to sell? Very often people think they've got something to sell and they don't. Do you have a market that will buy it at a profit? Do you have the ability and desire to sell it? And will you, if you do it, will you make a profit? And those are very simple questions, but most small businesses in South Africa don't have a compelling economic right to exist, and as a result, fail quite quickly. So there's no real market. It is a copycat, like somebody else said before. And to me, that's what I look for also in the businesses. Not only is the entrepreneur sound at 80%, but 20%, does this business in some way or another have a compelling economic right to exist? It doesn't have to be profitable now, but could it in the future?
David Zeidel, there's a name you know, says, how do you know when to keep going or to decide to quit a business or even an investment?
So my second book I wrote was called, the first one was Lose the Business Plan. Second one is called What to Do When You Want to Give Up. And basically the hypothesis of what to do when you want to give up is that for as long as you can ask different questions and get different answers, you carry on. I'm pro-life when it comes to entrepreneurship. I'm about persistence and pushing through. It's hard for everyone. No one's picking on anyone. I think God's picking on all entrepreneurs across the globe. And every country I go to, everyone says, but you don't understand. It's very hard for entrepreneurs here. And I say, yeah, well, I just come from another country and they said the same thing there. And back at home in South Africa, they say the same thing too. So entrepreneurship is hard and there's a high failure rate. And for me, it's about pushing through. So it's about persistence. And you have persistence when you know there's hope. And the only way you know there's hope is that if you've got new answers. So for me, it's about asking different questions. And I've created a methodology which I call shift questions, where you ask yourself quite weird questions, quite frankly, in order to provoke answers and new vistas to open up your mind. So as an example, I would ask, what would be different if you had to offer food at every meeting that you had with a client? What would be different? So take away the obvious that you're going to get rather large. What would happen there? And then take the answers from there and try and apply it. What happens if you could only open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and the rest of the market would operate normally? But the rule is you can only open at 6 o'clock in the evening and close at 6 a.m. But the rest of the world operated. I would go for international markets. I would delegate more. I would look for night shift workers, etc. for my market. And then I go, well, why don't you do that now? And so it opens up new opportunities. So it's about asking these different questions that opens up different answers. And for as long as there are different answers, you keep going.
Love it. Pro-life of businesses. Mandy Mzimba wants to know, what has surprised you most in your career?
That whenever I've thought a business was dead, it wasn't. The business, entrepreneurs can come back to life very easily. You think it's all over, there's no hope, and they find a way. And I've said that to the people who work at Raiz Corp, the people who are new, that you never ever underestimate the entrepreneurs desire or ability to come alive again, that they do not want to be dead. They do not want their businesses to die, and they will find ways. And when you think there's no pulse, all of a sudden, you know, so they reach out of the coffin and they're alive again and they're at it again. And we see this with entrepreneurs all the time. They lose their businesses and come back again. So that to me is one of, I suppose it's not surprising anymore, but it definitely surprised me. I thought it's all over, there's no ways, and poof, they become successful.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the program, and I'm having to sift through some of the questions because we still have many, but here's a beaut from Helena Beisheim. She says, can you clarify father issues, please?
So these two psychologists, Collins and Moore, showed that if you've got father issues, you're far more likely to become a successful entrepreneur. Now, I'm telling you what my hypothesis is. I'm just going to give you my hypothesis around this. In the animal kingdom, very often there's the alpha male, and then there is the let's call it the everyone else around. And what happens is that the younger bulls will challenge the alpha male, and they will try, but the alpha male is stronger, wiser, more experienced, and they will knock the young bull away. The younger bull will get older, try again, more confident, and this thing will go on, and it's witnessed by the whole herd. At some point, the younger bull becomes stronger and confident, and the alpha male will weaken, and there'll be a new alpha male. The other alpha male will go away, but it's witnessed by everyone. So my place here as my success is understood, because you saw what happened, right? You saw me take the guy out. So with father issues, generally it's about the fact that I'm unwitnessed. So I'm unwitnessed, and as I'm unwitnessed, I try to prove myself. Now, no matter, even if you reconcile later or you understand the psychology, it is so innate in one that there's this constant need to prove. And both, you know, I come with that. My mentor comes with that, who is a billionaire, and so many of the successful entrepreneurs that I have come across come with that to some extent. Now, I've got two boys. Now, I wonder, do I have to now become an absolute bastard to these boys for them to become successful? So, by the way, I just want to this is just a probability. It's not it's not an if-then statement. It's just a probability. But I found that it's very true in my experience of other entrepreneurs who've got father issues. And that's, by the way, male and female. It's not specific to male entrepreneurs.
There's a wonderful book that I read some years ago by, I think the guy's name was Rob Viner, but anyway, he was the chief executive of Hardrick & Struggles, which is the world's biggest headhunting firm. And the whole book was based on successful entrepreneurs, and every one of them had a single parent. So it might have been an absent father or an absent mother, but that was his thesis, was that of all of these people that these great leaders in business that he had met and known over the years, he said that was part of their development. Interesting, which comes along with what you were saying about the father issues. Just we're going to close off with Allon, but there is one final question here, which is pretty relevant, from Christopher Volater. He says, thanks for your time today. I feel like I'm stuck between a lifestyle entrepreneur and a growth entrepreneur. Do you have advice for transitioning to a growth entrepreneur? I feel like I've started to let go of some of the examples you gave of what a lifestyle entrepreneur would do as our business starts to grow. And I think that's one of those subjects that is very rarely identified or certainly absorbed. Many people have startups and they can't get them to the next level. There aren't that many Brian Joffes or Stephen Kossoffs and Bernard Cantors around who've taken a startup right to the top. Maybe you can give us some insights there.
I think the good person to read is Vern Harnish, who is one of the top authors on scale. But and he shows how many in the US market, how many businesses are over $1 million, $100,000 a year, $1 million, 10 million, etc. And it becomes minute as the number increases, the percentage of businesses that get there. I don't believe that you can transition. I think you one or the other. I know that's a harsh statement to make. And there's no hierarchy. And the issue is that somehow a growth entrepreneur is seen as better than a lifestyle entrepreneur. It's not true. I know many lifestyle entrepreneurs who are incredibly successful. They just accept that that's who they are, and they've done extremely well in that space. So my view is to make a choice, choose one, choose the one that is not ego-based, that you think that growth is better. And if lifestyle, you can make a huge amount of money as a lifestyle entrepreneur. I don't think let me put it this way. I haven't experienced an entrepreneur transition that well. I have not. It's been quite binary. And every time I've thought and heard that story, that particular story, I've been proven wrong. But maybe this particular viewer is the exception to the rule. But choose.
There have been a number of questions from people who would like to get hold of you. Can I give your email address, or would you like to? That's going okay. But let me give the website address. I'm going to give two website addresses. And it'll come to me via there in some way. So our website is partnerelite.co.za. That's partner, partnerelite.co.za, partnerelite.co.za. Or you can go to the Raiz Corp's website, which is raizcorp.com, raizcorp.com. And then you click on entrepreneur and you can see what we do, and it'll find its way to me in that way. I just want to also I know that I can't answer all the questions. This is so I'm very happy to help, but I can't answer specific questions per individual. Otherwise, I'll spend my days doing that and be one of the 96% of businesses that fail. I really hope that I'm not one of those. Allon, it's been such a privilege to have you here today for the past hour. Thank you. I'm sure that there's much of the seeds that you sowed and the bread that you threw on the water, much of it has been gobbled up, and judging from the attentive rate that we had with the people who are on the webinar today, a great appreciation. One last thing from my side, with your shirts, your Raiz Corp shirts, you remind me what we used to do in my other business at MoneyWeb. We used to have shirts with MoneyWeb written on them. I think it's time for Biznews. We're nearly 7 years old now, so we can maybe graduate to that point. But lovely seeing you again, and thank you again for your generosity of sharing your wisdom with us, and generosity of spirit for spending the past hour with us. And you've got all the information from Allon. We'll send through the questions that we weren't able to answer today, and perhaps he or members of his team will be able to support you and give you some insights. Look forward to the next time. Stu, can you give us a little bit of an indication where people can get the webinar afterwards, the recording?
Excellent. Thanks again for your time, Alan. Yes, Alec, I put the YouTube channel on the chat group there. If you want to just search Biznews on YouTube and you'll find our channel, and we'll put the webinar on there as soon as it's processed this afternoon.
Well, that's it from our guest, Allon Raiz, and myself, Alec Hogg, until the next Noontime Thursday webinar. Cheerio.